Well, to help us unpack this ANC elective conference that's taking place in Durban, in KwaZulu-Natal, we're now joined by Political Analyst Thabang Mashigo. Thanks so much indeed for joining us. Welcome to the program.
Peter, thank you very much. I'm delighted indeed.
All right, so I'm going to take you back to just before the conference, and I'm just wondering, the ANC sitting at Luthuli House maybe and in the province, and they would have had hopes of how the conference would go and how it would come out to keep the image and perhaps the message of the party intact. What was that hope, do you think?
The first thing I'd perhaps put forward as a premise is that the ANC currently is on life support. And with it being on life support, you have citizens that have the choice to pull the plug or not. And if we can paint a narrative of what would have been discussed prior to the conference, is how do we retain what we can already protect, and how could we shape a different narrative that could paint a picture of hope, or to ensure that we keep the 200,000 membership, for example, that is in KZN. So I don't want to be the bad guy and say it perhaps was a opportunity to strategize, another point of manipulation, but perhaps to say, how do we put things under the carpet? Because, Peter, a lot of the times the ANC has buried things under the carpet. The first was the radical economic transformation. Beautiful strategy, a beautiful plan, but not effected or implemented even the slightest or even well. So perhaps I think it was, we have all these policies. The intention of a national conference is to come up with resolutions. But how many resolutions do we have in this 9th conference? And how can we do things better? They have to answer questions internally before they account to the public.
All right, so before we discuss the results and things like that, overall, in its totality, from Friday through to just after the president spoke, how would you characterize the conference? Did they make steps forward, or was it the patient is still alive?
The patient is still alive. Definitely, I'd say that, and I'll tell you why. Firstly, it's not about who is elected. Firstly, we have, the new provincial chairperson who's elected, Uduma, and his executive committee. I think for me, we need to then adjudicate and assess what portfolio of evidence have they left in their previous portfolios. What have they done in their previous roles that they played? I mean, look, as the public, we have a right to, look at things like performance appraisals before you can get into a position of that nature. There are too many fractions in the ANC, Peter, which then dims the light of what truly matters. We need to go back to the times where, politics and the economy had a dialectical relationship. And I think those are the conversations that are being escaped. And even currently within the conference, we saw, a division of the Ramaphosa and the Zuma clan. And, it's quite surprising how the president reacted or handled himself, because one of the things that stood out throughout the 3 days was the song that was sung, Wenzenu Zuma. What did Zuma do? So you could see that there's quite forces of allegiance with Uzuma, and there's a number of associations or things that have not been cleared regarding that, and regarding particularly the RET agenda, which is what is being pushed by the Taliban group, so-called Taliban group that they call themselves, led by Uduma.
Yeah. All right, wherever there's factions, slates, is this division about philosophy, ideology, or personalities?
The division is about principle. And I know you didn't add it there. We once conducted an interview around leadership. Conventional leadership is about those who protect and advance their own interest. Unconventional leadership is about those who protect and advance the interest of others. And this is what we are looking for within the ANC. Will we get it? It's another question that begs for altruism or that begs for moral adjudication. But unfortunately, that's not the time to have that. What they should be looking into is what are the changes that are going to be applied. We don't want new plans. We don't want new policies. Those are there. And some of the times we've been told that they are quite advanced, in terms of ideological structures. But the problem is we don't have proper structures to conduct monitoring and evaluation, and we don't have ethical leadership to apply some of the plans that have been put in place. So for me, as an analyst, but most importantly, as a citizen, South African citizen that is paying tax, I am looking at what is going to be happening on the ground, because the current provincial elective committee are people that are not popular. They're not really known, especially Ustumo. Look, he was in the ANC MPL and also quite popular in the Youth League when Uzuma was around. But most importantly, they are popular on the ground. We don't know them as, citizens, but within their entities and their spaces, they are quite prominent. But we want to see what they're going to bring to the table. And as I said, they are on life support.
All right, so this slate, or this team, led by Siboniso Duma, what principles do they represent? What won in KZN?
The most important strategy that they sold, or how it was packaged, was the RET, Radical Economic Transformation. What does this look at? I mean, if we look at why Zikalala did not continue in his term, the first thing was we saw a destabilization of political formation. The problem with party politics is the minute you are elected locally and nationally and you are linked to a particular character, which could be a president, it then diffuses and decentralizes what truly matters within a party and within a unity. So for them, the agenda of the RET is saying, how do we then enhance or add economic value locally and regionally? We see that there's a lot of, for example, spaza shops, there's a lot of informal businesses. We see with COVID and the pandemic, citizens did not respond well. I think KZN was heavily affected, one, by the riots, which were not addressed accordingly. Two, they were affected by the floods, which, once again, municipalities are supposed to actively respond to those things. We didn't need business or corporate to come in, but the ANC feels like it needs a crutch to keep walking or to keep selling people hopes and dreams that will never be achieved. So I think the RET was a big thing to say, how do we transform the face of the economy and ensure that there is a congruent relationship between politics and economic value?
President Cyril Ramaphosa, now, at one point, it didn't look like he was going to make it, and then at some point, he was able to, his schedule freed up. How important was it for him to arrive and face whatever he was going to face?
Before he's president of the ANC, he's president of the country. So whatever opinions, whatever nuances that existed, he had to be mature enough to put them aside and show up as the president of that country in the province. So for me, I think there's a lot that the president has to answer himself before the party comes together to do so. So it was very critical for him to show face, if I could put it colloquially, and most importantly, to provide an address that shows that amidst party politics and fractions, we are still one. We are still, a unity, whatever agenda that he is strategically selling or applying. So I think it was very important to restore some kind of hope and to say, amongst whatever fractions that exist, we still need to come together and push forward the narrative that the resolution of the conference will bring forth.
Sometimes as the media, we notice the exceptions, the controversies, and the things that excite much more than overall. So I want us to step back and look overall at what happened over the few days and what happened when the president arrived, and the singing, the chanting. There were claps for him, but there were also boos. When you put it all together, what do you see happened?
Very interesting one. I think there's a lot that the president has escaped. Leadership is about accountability and transparency. the problem with our current government is that they are bleeding on people that never cut them. And the problem when you bleed on people that never cut you is they become too injured. Even when you try to rub and you try to mend, it doesn't, it doesn't register because all they feel is the pain. So for me, it was interesting to observe that the ones that applauded him, was it out of respect because he's our president? Or was it out of, look, we're not too sure because you're on a thin line. So if you make it, just know that we are with you and we're supporting you. But if you don't, we're not too sure where we stand because people like, for example, Uzigalala, showed us what betrayal and loyalty means. We saw between, Zuma and Ramaphosa in terms of the change of regime. So we don't have loyalists in any party, whether it's the ANC, DA, and so forth. We have people that are serving their personal interests. So those that booed, it's very important to note why they booed them or why they booed the president. Was it out of frustration? Was it out of we want answers? Was it out of you're not actually serving this particular party? So there's something brewing on the ground and we're about to see it very soon after this conference.
Well, we shall wait and see. Sihle Zikalala must be waiting also to see if he's still got a job. We'll leave it there for the time being. Thank you so much indeed for joining us.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you.
All right, that's Political Analyst Thabang Mashigo speaking to us about the just wrapping up of the ANC Elective Conference.